everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are once again talking about a rope bondage related subject, and this one is going to be a little bit personal. It's going to be a little bit hard to talk about. I have an idea in my head about what I want to say, but I have not pre-prepared anything, so this may be something of a ramble. But with all of the talk that we have been doing about safety and consent and risk and failures, I wanted to share my own story about that. And I actually have multiple stories where things have gone wrong, there has been consent issues, and they're things that I haven't really talked about before, but I hope that sharing them will help you learn something or understand why I am so passionate about this, or just something. Anyways, I should probably just get into the stories. So the first time I had an issue in rope was like a year into my kink journey. I had dabbled a little bit with a partner with very basic bondage. I actually met this partner at an intro to rope tying class because neither one of us had people to go with, and we talked over FetLife. It's a whole story. But I had very little experience, and at the time I was very active on FetLife. I posted a lot of photos, I messaged and responded to a lot of people. This was before I had any presence on YouTube at all, actually, so it was the very beginning of my kink journey at that point, and I had just a different relationship with BDSM. I was, again, very new. I didn't necessarily know what I didn't know, which is why I talk about this so much, is I thought that I knew about, like, negotiation. I thought that I knew about consent because I had a little bit of experience. But something ended up happening which at first went really well and then went in a different direction. I was actually messaged by a quite famous rope top that is well known for their photos and their videos and a bunch of stuff, and they were interested in tying with me and wanted to basically work on a project together. And of course, I was really excited to have this amazing opportunity basically fall into my lap. And because I wasn't part of a larger rope bondage community, I didn't really know about the process for vetting. I didn't really know what to even ask, but I did look at their pictures, I saw their profile, I saw that they had worked on a ton of different projects and different photo shoots and just tied with a lot of people, and they offered references and I talked to those references and everything seemed to be totally fine. And as we negotiated, they sent me a basically customized yes, no, maybe checklist where we went over every possibility that could happen. We talked about doing chains as part of a bondage scene. We talked about using a Hitachi. We talked about using gags. We talked about fetish heels. Like, there was a lot on this list. And I filled it out and he saw it, and we had a hard copy, I believe, as well as an email copy, and eventually we met up and we played together and it was a lot of fun. From there we did more scenes together. We eventually went into doing a first suspension. And again, at the time, I was really excited about this. I was like, oh my gosh, I literally don't even know what this is, but it sounds really cool and I want to try it. And now looking back on that, I am frankly horrified because this person didn't really tell me anything about suspension. They knew that I was newer to BDSM. They knew that I had never done anything like this before, but they didn't tell me about nerve damage. They didn't tell me about falls. They didn't tell me about drops. They didn't tell me about rope space. There was a lot, again, that I really didn't know. I remember they did give me very basic instruction in, like, you know, the basic nerve test that you do when you're in rope and you're trying to check out, are your hand nerves, your arm nerves kind of functioning the way that they should. But they didn't tell me about how common things were or which ties they were going to be doing and how that relates to nerve damage, things like that. And I luckily had a really good first suspension. It was actually outside, and it was really fun. I had a really good time, and luckily I had found out that I was the type of rope bottom that doesn't really go into rope space that easily. What rope space is it is a subset of subspace, which is an altered mind state that you can go into when you do BDSM. And rope space happens when you do bondage, in particular when you are up in the air. And for some people, it happens basically immediately, and it's very intense, and it goes for the whole scene. For me, though, I tend to stay more aware, more communicative, which for the kinds of scenes that we were having was actually very helpful. Now, as we continued this tying relationship and we kept doing things, eventually we got to doing a scene where something that I had explicitly said no to was brought out. I don't think I told this person that I was asexual. We kind of didn't have to because we went through that checklist and I said no to all of the sexual things more or less, and we hadn't had any sexual contact up to that point during any of the scenes. You know, there was very light, very incidental touching, right? Where when you're putting on a chest harness, you might graze by a nipple, right? Or when you're doing something around the legs, you may have to go around the buttocks or, you know, whatever genitals you have to be able to tie the rope appropriately and with the right amount of tension, all of that kind of thing. However, in this scene, what ended up happening is they brought out a Hitachi. And I remember very clearly to this day that I had said no to that. I was very explicit. I didn't want to involve a vibrator, especially not that intensity of a vibrator. And luckily, I was aware enough in the scene to be like, hey, what the fuck? Like, I don't think I said it that aggressively. Now looking back on it, with all of my other years of experience, I absolutely would have said, oh, what the fuck are you doing? But I was like, I don't think we negotiated for that. Do you remember that? And I took it to mean that they didn't really remember that because they had a lot of play partners. Maybe they forgot to double check, you know, the mood, the moment, whatever. I wanted to believe that they had honest intentions and it was just a mistake. However, I believe what they said was essentially to the effect of, oh, I know, but I thought this would make the scene more fun. Which is not how limits work, as it turns out. That's not how boundaries work. You don't get to say, oh, well, I know you have this boundary, but it would be fun for me if we did this anyways. I didn't ask to have an orgasm. I didn't ask to be touched in any sexual way. Again, we had never talked about that. And suddenly we were going from 0 to 100. And I know other people that have had a very similar experience, in particular, weirdly enough, with a Hitachi, where in the middle of a scene, people that have had a non-sexual tying relationship have brought out a Hitachi, more specifically the top has brought out a Hitachi and been like, hey, can we add this? Does this seem like fun? And sometimes it is very much a normal, ongoing type of relationship where negotiation or renegotiation mid-scene is part of what they happen to do, and the person is fine with that, and they maybe didn't say previously that this was a hard no, never do, and so they're okay with that kind of fluidity to their scenes. However, again, I know people where that was not the case, and it was definitely a hard no, and they didn't want it to happen. Luckily, they did not end up using the vibrator on me because I clearly reminded them of their boundary, and they luckily were not willing to push the envelope. However, it made things very awkward, and eventually we had planned to do another scene because of their reaction. I had taken it to be an honest mistake. I just thought they forgot. And so I was willing to scene with them again. Again, knowing what I know now, it would have been done so. But because this person was so well known and had all of these pictures and knew all of these people, and everyone said, oh my gosh, this person is so amazing, I didn't believe that they could have done that on purpose, and was trying to see what they could get away with. And this person actually lived quite far away from me. I believe they were about 2 hours or so away, and I would drive to them because I was still in college. I lived with a roommate who did not know about BDSM. It was not something where they were going to come to me. I didn't have any equipment. It made sense for me to go to them, but it was quite a long trip. And I had spent the whole morning getting ready. I was doing my hair, I was putting on makeup, I was picking out my outfit. And then I kid you not, like 15 minutes before I am supposed to leave, I get a text from this person being like, actually, I don't feel like doing this anymore. Bye, essentially. They just fully just quit immediately. Oh, and they didn't talk to me about it at all after that. It was just complete radio silence. They didn't say why, and I think it was because they understood that I wasn't going to let them push the envelope. And it was really shitty. I thought for a long time that it was something that I had done as like a bad rope bottom. I hadn't let them do what they needed to do or whatever, and thankfully I know better than that now, and I have much better partners, and I have learned way more about bondage and suspension and risk and danger and negotiation. And I don't want to say that I would never end up there again, but I at least have my defenses built up to where that would be very unlikely, which is why I am such a fucking hard ass about learning your own stuff as a rope bottom, learning what you need to know for your own safety, what to expect in a scene, what a top should have on them, knowing how to ask those important questions. So you are going to end up in the best possible situation. And I just didn't know. And I didn't have friends that could have told me, that had more experience, that could have said, hey, did they tell you about this? Did you know about this? That seems kind of sketchy. I did not have anything like that. So I hope that I am creating a little space here online where people can learn the things that I didn't get to learn before they do stuff like what I did. Sadly, though, this is not my only story of something going very wrong. Just briefly, I will bring this up because I have talked about it elsewhere. I have had a scene happen where there was actually a problem with a spectator, and I was doing a suspension with a friend at a play party. It was actually at Kink Fest. And as I'm literally fully suspended in the air, I am at the top of the ring. I am as high up as I could go. We're like 20 minutes in at this point. We're in the middle of the freaking scene. And this guy comes up and is like, oh, hey, I know who you are. My friend really likes you. Do you want to meet my friend? And the thought process that led to that moment baffles me. Unless that person knew nothing about bondage or has never seen any of my videos where I've talked about don't interrupt people's scenes. And it It wasn't like, hey, your hair's on fire or that rope line is about to snap. Like, it wasn't a safety issue. It wasn't anything of any particular importance. But at that moment, they were so excited they could not contain themselves. And they were like, hey, can you meet my friend? It'll be something that I never forget, because this person then proceeded to stay like 2 feet away from the scene and then just watch until I was done. And they watched the whole time that we wrapped up and did aftercare and checked in. And then they were like, are you ready now? I was like, oh my God, don't do that. Don't do that. If you just, the lesson here is don't interrupt people's scenes. If you want to say hi to a friend, let them know you're at the party, wait until they're done, go do other stuff, talk to other people, circle back around and be like, hey, wow, I noticed you were doing a really cool scene. Did you have a fun time? But don't get in the middle of the action and be like, hey, what's going on? That was very disruptive. Luckily, the scene was otherwise really good overall. I had a fun time. Would do again, except for that person. But actually, the last thing that I want to talk about is something that happened more recently. It was within the last, it was pre-COVID. So this would have been two and a half years ago, I want to say. It was a while ago, but is still fairly recent. And this, by this point, was when I had had a lot of experience. I had been doing rope for a long time. I had been to conferences. I had been to classes. I thought I knew kind of more about what I was doing. And this happened with someone that I was a very involved, ongoing partner with. We tied together a lot. That was a really key part of our relationship. And we went to a class together. It was actually something that a local couple was hosting, and they actually, this was actually a couple that was from my first ever dungeon, and I had not seen them in a very long time, and I had always admired what they did. They had a lot of talent. They helped put on a lot of parties when I was still around that area, and they had actually left being the people that helped run the dungeon, and they were more private people at that point. So to see that they were teaching a class where I live now was really exciting, because it sort of looped my whole experience of BDSM back together, and just I really enjoyed the idea of like seeing old people that I had known from my old dungeon. And the class that they taught was definitely a higher skill level. We went over a suspendable strappado tie, which is when like the arms are kind of together like you would see in an arm binder. There was another tie that was like a leg tie, I think, but there was one thing that happened where, I mean, it hadn't necessarily gone super well to that point. The strappado was extremely complicated, because obviously when you are extending out all of the joints like this and you're really working with the shoulders and the elbows and everything else, to construct something like that that is going to be safe and not too nervy, it's going to be complicated. And it was very fiddly, it was very pinchy, it was grabbing the hair on my arm. It was not fun, but I was excited for the next thing that we were doing, which was we did some form of like a basket tie, which is typically around like the hip area onto the legs, and they were actually loading it into an upright suspension, which is not something that I do a lot of, because with my frame, I don't really have a lot of boobs. I don't really have a lot that can kind of hold up a harness in an upright position, because I don't typically suspend with TKs, because my arms, just where a TK band would go, are very nervy. So I didn't really have a lot of experience with upright suspensions. I don't know how much of a factor that was, but it was part of what happened here. And the tie that we were doing should have been something that was tied on the floor first. And if I remember correctly, basically what it was is there was almost like a lap band that went across the lower stomach area to sort of support the whole structure. And we did a very basic, quick run through of the tie on the ground first, but we didn't really spend a lot of time tying it and retying it and untying it and really figuring out how it was put together. So fairly quickly we decided, or rather my top decided, to put it in the air. And I immediately did not feel secure. I was very uncomfortable. I said, this doesn't feel right. I was trying to communicate, but also trying to adjust myself in case it was me. And it didn't seem right. And my top was trying to fiddle with things. They were messing with stuff. And then I fell out of the harness. Luckily, because it was upright and because I had full access to my feet and everything else, I didn't fall on the floor, I didn't hit my head, but it was mortifyingly embarrassing. I cannot tell you, I cannot think of a time when I have done anything BDSM related that has been as embarrassing as falling out of rope in a room full of the 30 people that you know in your local community and people that you knew from 5 years ago that you're trying to make a good impression towards because they were really influential in your development as a BDSM person. And it was so embarrassing. It was, if that was going to be a humiliation scene, instead, it would have been the best one ever. But it wasn't. It was not supposed to happen. And because my top had a little bit of an ego, and because I was not injured, there was sort of a denial for help that happened, where it was like, oh no, we got this. And the person that was teaching the class, came over afterwards and tried to talk about things and kind of give feedback on how things were put together. But I was so uncomfortable trying that again because I was lucky that I hadn't been injured at all. Basically, I was like, I just don't want to do this again. This is uncomfortable for me. And I think if it was actually put together the way that it was meant to, it would have been a very fun tie. It would have felt good, but I just didn't feel secure, and I didn't feel like I could trust my partner at that point. And it was very damaging to our relationship, to our tying partnership, and things really ramped down after that because they never admitted that they fucked up. They never took responsibility for that. They really swept it under the rug, and it felt really scary to me. It was a very short fall. I was not really in the air, but it was scary, and I was like, well, they're doing this to this tie. What the fuck else have they been doing with everything else we've been doing? Have I just been lucky at this point? And it was a lot. And this is why I am so passionate about things like one of the videos I did recently where I broke down, hey, this is a behavior that is actually a trend, and here's what they did wrong, and here's why it's dangerous, and here's why this is too much risk. And that is why I talk about stuff like that. That is why, because I have been there. I have fallen in rope. I have trusted and experienced rope top and had that burn me. This is not to say that rope tops can't make mistakes, that they should be perfect all the time, that they should always know everything. That is not what I am saying. However, because there was a lack of patience, there was an ego, there was a desire to impress the people in the room, I think. Those all worked together to make the scenario that led to tying outside of your skill set, which is something that is key to note. You can be a very competent rope top. You can be really practiced. You can tie a lot. However, when you are learning a new skill that is not like anything you have done before, because this was very, very differently constructed from anything that we had done before, you got to be humble. You got to know where to start from. And you can't be flippant and be like, oh, I've done stuff like this all the time. I'm just wing it. Winging it's fine. No big deal. And I think part of it was that everyone else in the room was tying it very easily, was tying it quickly. They knew kind of the base of what this was coming from. They were familiar with ties like this, and we weren't, and that wasn't because of a lack of skill or experience. It was just a difference in style. And I think that really kind of maybe made my top self-conscious, where they were like, oh, well, you know, everyone else is doing this better than me, so I have to like catch up and prove that I can do this. And a class especially is not about one-upping the other people in the room. It's not about trying to be the most badass rope top ever, or the most badass rope bottom for that matter. It is about improving your skills and admitting when you don't know something and accepting help when you don't and when you do not feel comfortable. And yeah, it was really shitty, and I have so much regret. I have so much regret over that moment, because it was a turning point in our relationship as rope bondage partners in a really big way. And I'm glad that if I was going to have the experience of falling out of rope, it was in a room full of people. There was an immediate response. It was upright. I was not in any real danger of breaking my neck or cracking my head open. And my partner, you know, physically at least, took care of me right away, right? They supported my body weight. They did the things that they should have done, more or less, except for that they didn't accept help when it was offered after the class. They couldn't admit or didn't want to admit that they had messed up, and they didn't offer me the support that I needed after coming out of a scenario like that. That was where the mess up happened. And I am very grateful that none of the scenarios I have been in have been worse than what I have described today. I know it can be worse. I know people that legitimately have had full-on sexual assault happen while in rope because they were new and the person didn't tell them about how BDSM can affect your brain, and they take advantage of that. It is a very serious thing. It is a very serious problem, and I will, to the best of my ability, bring light to that as often as I can, and I will try my friggin' best to make this experience of doing BDSM a better thing, because I believe it can be, and I want it to be. Anyways, those are my stories. I don't know if this did anything productive. I don't know if anyone can relate to what I am talking about, but I hope that someone hears this, and then when they start going towards something like what I went through, they can predict it, they can know what to do sooner, and just kind of stem the tide, essentially. Anyways, I suppose if you liked this, please comment down below, tell me what you think about this, and also please do subscribe, because I make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related topics. I don't normally get this personal, but I think for educational reasons, it is something that I wanted to cover and demonstrate that I have been through things like this, and just wanting to use my suffering and my mistakes as something that other people can learn from. And if you did enjoy this, if you like learning from my mistakes, I guess, you can also go over to my Patreon, because that is what makes all of these videos possible. I do typically get more personal over on my Patreon, because it's kind of a close-knit, fun little space where I can be my complete total self, and I really enjoy that. And yeah, if you guys want to check it out, a link will be down below. If you do already support me over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.